Patterson in for you today as Hugh Hewitt concludes vacation week. And as is the case, whenever Hugh takes some time off, and it's much deserved time off, he will be back on Monday. Actually, he'll be back in hour 3 with a new edition of the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arns, so stick around for that. But in our 2 hours together, as is the case, whenever I am fortunate enough to sit behind the microphone, there is a ton of stuff going on in the news that you may know something about, you may have heard a little bit about, but there's a lot of it you're going to be going, okay, well, I hadn't heard that yet. And hopefully that's what we're going to unpack over the next couple of hours. We'll be joined later in the hour by Matt Continetti of Commentary and AEI. Of course, there's very few people finer than Matt, kind of uncovering all the political news both here and abroad. And maybe one of his peers, as to being that good of a pundit, is Ben Domenech of The Spectator, who will be along in hour 2. And we're going to have a conversation with Jim Garrity of National Review. And Jim is not even just back from a 2-week trip to Ukraine to see what's going on the ground there. He also decided to stop by Syria and see what's going on there. So we're going to have, firsthand accounts of what's going on in a couple of hot spots around the world. And then we'll be, of course, joined by Tarzana Joe. So let me kind of cut to the chase of the overview of what I could be spending an entire day on. And then we'll kind of dive into the some of the sound that's going on today. There are updates on the Ukraine and Russia front. The White House team, Michael Waltz is going to lead this contingent, is supposed to be meeting with Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia next week to finally hammer out their side of a deal. In the meantime, the White House has been putting the squeeze on Ukraine, not just pulling military funding and support, but withholding intelligence. They are now withholding satellite imagery, which is basically blinding Ukraine and making it harder for them to prosecute whatever their prosecution of the war is. Donald Trump wants this to end, and he's squeezing them. And you can like it or not like it. That's a different conversation that we'll have with some of the people on the show today. But that's just the reality of what's going on. In the meantime, Russia has been seizing on the fact that Ukraine is hamstrung the last few days, and they have stepped up their campaign, and they're fighting with greater intensity. Donald Trump doesn't like that. He took to Truth Social and X this morning and said, based on the fact that Russia is absolutely pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now, I am strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions. Other sanctions, tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final settlement agreement on peace is reached. To Russia and Ukraine, get to the table right now before it is too late. Thank you. It only took maybe a half an hour before Vladimir Putin, through Russia, did respond and said, well, yes, actually, I think we can pull back a little bit. Russia is willing to discuss a temporary truce in Ukraine, provided there is progress towards a final peace settlement, according to people familiar with the matter in Moscow. This is through Bloomberg and the Economic Times in Great Britain. In the first signal of a positive response from President Vladimir Putin to U.S. counterpart Donald Trump's call for a ceasefire, the offer was conveyed at last month's talks in Saudi Arabia between top Russian and American officials, the people said, asking not to be identified. In order to agree to a cessation of hostilities, there would have to be a clear understanding about the framework principles of the final peace accord, two people with knowledge of the matter said. Russia will insist in particular, on establishing the parameters of an eventual peacekeeping mission, including agreement on which countries would take part. Now, here's what's fascinating about this. That's not being reported. According to this, if the reporting is true, which is questionable, because you can't take anything Putin says at face value, But according to the response to what Donald Trump did this morning, Russia is in principle okay with the concept of having some peacekeeping forces to help establish the new line, wherever the new line ends up being, which a lot of people said, well, they'll never agree to that. Apparently, Putin is open to the idea for now. At the White House today, there was another Oval Office session where the media was in, and there was kind of a gaggle that turned into some Q&A back and forth. And here's what Donald Trump had to say about dealing with Ukraine and dealing with Russia. Cut number one.
I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine. And they don't have the cards. They don't have the cards. As you know, we're meeting in Saudi Arabia on sometime next week, early. And we're talking, I find that in terms of getting a final settlement, it may be easier dealing with Russia, which is surprising because they have all the cards. I mean, they're bombing the hell out of them right now. And I put a statement in, a very strong statement. Can't do that. You can't do that. Mr. President, we're trying to help them, and Ukraine has to get on the ball and get a job done.
So Donald Trump is still trying to mediate a peace between the two sides. Michael Waltz, the National Security Advisor, was also in the Oval Office, and he spoke to the same gaggle, said this about what's coming next week. Cut number 9.
Give it a little definition of what's going on, please.
Sure. Well, the president has been crystal clear, and he's been clear to all sides. The fighting has to stop. Both sides need to get to the table. We had a good engagement. Both leaders have said only President Trump could do so, and only he has been able to do so. We had an initial engagement with the Russians. The Ukrainians had a great opportunity to bind our economies together through that mineral deal. Unfortunately, that didn't go so well, but we think we're going to get things back on track. Secretary Rubio, myself and Ukrainian delegation will be meeting in Saudi Arabia next week to get these talks back on track, get the ceasefire in place, and drive peace home.
There is news on the Gaza/Iran front. I'll play you a lot more extended video in the segment that follows this one. In the meantime, between the two hotspots around the world and the modification of the tariffs, and we got news out of Mexico today that President Sheinbaum is going to take a second look at their relationship with China and what comes into Mexico from China, which is the makings of fentanyl. So that's actually good news and maybe some of what Donald Trump was looking to see. The markets are reacting very positively to what the news is, whether it's the jobs market out or the jobs report that came out today, the news on the tariff front, where things are pointing in the foreign policy hotspots, the war fronts. The market seemed to bounce back pretty good today thus far. As of right now, it's up a couple hundred points. In fact, let's go ahead and do the quick market report and get that out of the way while we're here. And that is, of course, brought to us by American Federal. AmericanFederal.com, 800-221-7694, the place that Hugh trusts, where he buys his gold. Now, gold over this last week with all the tariff talks skyrocketed. It went up to darn near $3,000 an ounce. It hit about $29.74 before retreating a little bit today. It's down just over $11, $29.15 as of right this very second. But that's not the price you pay. You need to call 800-221-7694, talk to Nick Grovich, and he and or his team will tell you what they think is going to happen and what your actual price would be with his commission marked up on top of that. So go to AmericanFederal.com and see if now is the time to get into the gold game, especially with the president announcing Bitcoin and all. There's just all sorts of uncertainty, which, as Byron York wrote in the Washington Times today, there's always a lot of uncertainty built into any administration, but Trump's floor on uncertainty especially with the market, seems to be even higher because that's kind of baked in. You know you're going to get uncertainty with Trump, and we certainly are getting a lot of that right now. But you're also getting clarity on things. And we're going to cover all the rest of the news. What happened at Columbia University and their funding getting pulled today. Brendan Carr at the FCC going after YouTube. There's all sorts of fun stuff ahead. Don't miss a minute. We actually got some really good news. You've been hearing on Hugh's show over the last couple of weeks, little snippets every day of Dennis Prager from times past. Of course, Dennis, we're all still praying for his recovery after a fall, and it has caused him some temporary paralysis, and he's had all sorts of breathing issues, and we keep hearing he's going to make it back and his voice is going to come back, and we are praying for that day to return. Well, actually, I am here to tell you that we have the first recorded Dennis Prager on voice since his accident. And I want to share that with you now. This is his son, David, who was at a hospital visit with him, I think a day ago is when this was. And they released on Prager University, this 2 or 3 minute long or 7 minute long video package. And I just wanted to let you hear Dennis because they actually recorded a little bit of Dennis. Here's that cut now, cut 12.
I'm really feeling much better, as you can hear. My voice is practically normal, which is very exciting because I intend to go back on a radio. And we'll release the date, I think within a week. And my beloved son, one of my beloved sons, but my beloved son David is here with me. And I can't tell you how much he has done for me.
Well, you should try to tell them.
Hey, no, that was good. That was good. You didn't have to say you're kidding. That was very good. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. All right, everybody. Looking forward to being with you often.
He's been reading your notes and your letters and loving them.
Oh, you have no idea. I actually want them all placed in, what do we call it? The Prager Library at yeah. I want to keep them for the rest of my life and beyond that.
Now, that's really cool and inspirational, actually, to actually hear Dennis working his way back. You can tell that he gets kind of short of breath, and in his head will want to say a couple of sentences more on a breath than he realizes he actually has. So he's got to pause and take a breath to be able to finish that train of thought. But, you know, he's still working his way back. But Dennis is still Dennis. He's still there. And that's really inspirational and encouraging to hear. You know what else is inspirational? The work that Food for the Poor is doing down in El Salvador. All of us here on the network are spending the month helping raise relief for a bunch of kids that would otherwise maybe trying to make the trek up north, up through the stem of Mexico, and to try to make something of it in the United States. Well, they're going to stay put in El Salvador or wherever their host country is. But the needs don't change. The hunger is still there. They still need the basics of life. And we shouldn't be focused on governments trying to take care of the problem. This is actually a private sector problem. This is you and me. This is something that we can do something about if you partner with us and Food for the Poor. 855-359-4673 is a phone number. That's 855-359-4673. Or you can go to hughhewitt.com. And at the very top, there is a banner that will load that says Feed Their Future, which will take you to the landing page to be able to help out Food for the Poor. Or there's a third way. You can text the name Hewitt to 51555. That's texting Hewitt to 51555. $100 feeds a kid for an entire year. $100. You can spend $100 on a dinner for two here in the States, depending on what state you're in. $100 can feed a kid for a year. Do the math. $300. That's 3 kids taken care of for a year. And that's if you help out Food for the Poor. Go to the top of the page at Hugh Hewitt or call 855-359-4673 and help us help them. I appreciate it. Let's get back to the news. At the Oval Office address, or the Oval Office gaggle that was this morning, Donald Trump was asked a little bit more about what it would look like if Gaza and Hamas didn't respond and release the hostages. He actually had a couple things to say, which I found very interesting. This is what he had to say about the Palestinians now. Cut number 6.
And what happened? How was it? I said, did you see anybody in there that was kind, like out of the hundreds of people that you were seeing, Hamas? Did some of them wink at you and say, don't worry, you're going to be okay, or give you a piece of bread, or no? I said, were there any people that were, like, kind? I was shocked. The answer was nobody. There was nobody. Just the opposite. They'd be slapped and punched. One man broke his ribs. He couldn't breathe for a month. It was brutal. I was so surprised. Could you think there'd be a couple of people that would be kind, that would say, you're going to be okay, but they had none of that. It's pretty amazing. Brian?
See, that's the thing that we're starting to learn is out of the entire community in the Palestinian area of Gaza, you would think that somebody, I mean, if you want to make the comparison to the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, right? You had people like Schindler, who knew what was going on was really, really bad and went along with keeping the public face of it up, but all the while trying to spirit away and save Jews wherever he could, right? There were Germans that were not all on board with what was going on. People are looking at the Palestinians now, trying to find the one Palestinian or 2 Palestinians that know what happened on October 7th and in the year that has progressed was a bad thing. And nobody can find them because all the Palestinians seem to be on board with what Hamas did. And that's a problem. We're going to talk about that, what Trump said about Iran, plus the Ukraine's, all sorts of stuff ahead. I am joined by a good friend of the program and probably one of the smartest pundits on the right. If there is somebody out there that is got a more sober and serious look on what's going on and a fairly neutral way of looking at things, it's Matt Continetti. You read him over at the American Enterprise Institute. He's, of course, with Commentary Magazine, is on their podcasts all the time, and writes over there, has been affiliated with the Free Beacon. Matt, welcome back. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, Dwayne.
So I want to kind of cut through the noise of, who said what and when, and trying to politicize all the noise and try to get to what's going on. Let's start on the Ukraine-Russia front and react to what Donald Trump said this morning to Russia, saying, knock it off, you're getting a little too out in front of your skis, pull it back some. And Russia apparently signaling that they'd be willing to pull back. And they'd even be willing, according to the Economist story that I saw, they're agreeable to having peacekeepers enforce whatever the new thing is. What do you make of today's events on that part of what's going on?
Well, there are a lot of moving parts. What do we know? We know that Donald Trump has campaigned and won election on a pledge to bring the Ukraine war to an end. And he has spent these first weeks in office attempting to get both parties to the table. It seems like Ukraine is about to come to America's position in the negotiations next week in Riyadh with the U.S. team and sign this minerals agreement, which has been out there for a while now, and pledge also to abide by a ceasefire that includes no air attacks and no naval attacks. The question then is, what will Russia do? And I think President Trump was frustrated by the fact that since his initial outreach to Russia, when, again, the U.S. representatives met with Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, in Riyadh last month, Russia has actually upped the violence against Ukraine, including last night in this missile attack on Ukraine. And so what we saw from President Trump this morning was a threat to Russia, that they too need to be able to come to the table, or else they face additional sanctions. I really don't know what's going to happen next. If Russia does say that they are open to a European peacekeeping force once a ceasefire is reached, that is a major advance. But I would say that with all things Russia, Dwayne, I go by the old Reagan saying,
trust but verify, baby. Yeah, trust but verify. I totally get that too. I'm not saying you take Putin's word as far as you can, throw it, but the fact that they responded directly to what Trump said and said, okay, we'll pull back a little bit, and this is what kind of stuff we would be agreeable to. They didn't have to put that out today. I thought that was actually kind of interesting they did. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about what you thought of the not State of the Union, the joint session of Congress speech the president gave, and the reaction to it, and the reaction to the reaction to it. And we're also going to talk a lot about the Gaza situation. I want to play just quickly what we played right before the break, and that's Donald Trump talking about the Palestinians before we run out of time. Let's play cut 6 for Matt.
And what happened? How was it? I said, did you see anybody in there that was kind, like out of the hundreds of people that you were seeing, Hamas? Did some of them wink at you and say, don't worry, you're going to be okay, or give you a piece of bread, or no? I said, were there any people that were, kind? I was shocked. The answer was nobody. There was nobody. Just the opposite. They'd be slapped and punched. One man broke his ribs. He couldn't breathe for a month. It was brutal. I was so surprised. Could you think there'd be a couple of people that would be kind, that would say, you're going to be okay, but they had none of that. It's pretty amazing. Brian?
30 seconds, Matt, and then we'll come back after the break. What do you make of that?
I think Donald Trump understands that in its decade-plus rule, Hamas has fundamentally corrupted the society in Gaza. And that's why things like the Trump plan, are a radical intervention in the Gaza Strip to end Hamas rule, are necessary. And he's following his instincts correctly in this matter.
We will layer on top of that when we come back from the break and play you what the president said about Iran, which was really kind of interesting to me, and I'm sure it was to Matt as well. Matt, I got to go fast because time's short. I adored what the president said in his final ultimatum to Hamas. Turn them over, or this is really, he drew as red of a line as you can draw, he drew. But my complaint in that is, unless you signal the same type of language to Khamenei in Tehran, it's not really that big of a threat, which is why what he said in the Oval today, which I want to play for you now, really made me sit up and take notice. Cut number 5.
It did start. Think of what happened. Inflation, you have the war with Ukraine and Russia, that wouldn't have happened. October 7th would have never happened. Israel, they had no money. Iran had no money. Iran was stone cold broke, and now they have a lot of money. And that's going to be the next thing you'll be talking about is Iran. What's going to happen with Iran? And there'll be some interesting days ahead. That's all I can tell you. We're down to final strokes with Iran. That's going to be an interesting time. And we'll see what happens. But we're down to the final moments. We're at final moments. Can't let them have a nuclear weapon. I think that I would have had a deal within 1 month after the rigged election of 2020. They were all set to make a deal. And then when I lost, they saw this person who's a stupid person, very stupid person. And they said, let's not make a deal. And they were right. He took the sanctions off. They became rich under Biden. They went from having no money to having $300 billion. All in a short period. It's oil. Oil builds up fast. It's a nice living if you have a nice oil well. And they do. They have a lot of nice oil wells, right? So anyway, it's going to be a big thing. It's an interesting time in the history of the world. But we have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon. Very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess. And hopefully we can have a peace deal. You know, I'm not speaking out of strength or weakness. I'm just saying I'd rather see a peace deal than the other. But the other will solve the problem.
Matt Continetti, what do you make of that?
Well, it's really a remarkable moment. Trump repeated the phrase final moments several times, 3 times, I think. And what I take from that, Dwayne, is he views this attempt to enforce maximum pressure, which his administration has restored, while also saying to the Ayatollah, if you want to come to the table, the opportunity is there, as Iran's really final chance to reach some type of diplomatic arrangement about its nuclear program. And as he said at the very end, he used the phrase the other. And of course, the other is a military strike by Israel that would set back the Iranian nuclear program by years. And America could either participate in that strike, or we could assist Israel with logistics and intelligence backup. And I think those are kind of the options as we enter this endgame. But it is incredible, as a final point, just how many different crises this president has to deal with. You know, the border, which was this huge challenge for 4 years, supposedly, from the Biden administration, record numbers of illegal immigrants into this country. The Trump administration has closed the border in a matter of weeks.
Yes.
We still have to work out inflation, obviously. That's a big problem. But then you have these gigantic foreign policy crises that seem to be dominating the headlines, even as President Trump is enacting his revolution in American government through the instrument of Doge. So, as he said in that clip we just heard, what a time in the history of the world, right?
Absolutely. When he talked about Iran's oil wells, I heard that, and I'm thinking, nice oil well you have. Shame if something happened to it. I mean, didn't you kind of hear the same thing?
Yeah, I heard that. And the strategy was always to squeeze Iran economically so that you don't have to use violent force. You don't have to use American fighter jets and cruise missiles. But if you are unable to do that, if Iran remains intransigent, it remains the wielder of terror, the designer of plots to kill American officials, including President Trump, the mastermind behind Hamas and Hezbollah, then force might be necessary. Might be Israel, but we might also help as well.
Since we're on Israel and matters that relate to Israel, what did you make of what the General Services Administration did today in coordination with the Department of Education, yanking $400 million of funding from Columbia after saying, we're not going to put up with this anti-Semitic nonsense, and since you seem intent on it, no more funding for you?
Well, I'm a graduate of Columbia University, class of 2003, and I have to say I jumped up and down when I heard this news. I think it's exactly the treatment that Columbia deserves. It happened. Something happened to my alma mater. It has become a terrible place to be a student, much less to be a Jewish student. And harsh remedies are necessary. And so I hope the policy is a wake-up call. We'll see if it goes through. But I think this is a sign that Columbia and Barnard, where its sister college, part of the university, where students occupy buildings and harass students just this week. I mean, if this doesn't work, I sometimes think the Carthaginian option might be necessary, Dwayne.
I'm thinking so too. I have very little patience for anti-Semitism going on, and the fact that they're trying to do it on Trump's watch, man, it's time to go Carthage. That's a great way to put it. Matt, do you have 3 more minutes? I want to come back real quick and talk about the speech. Do you have a couple?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll come back after the break. We'll talk to Matt Continetti about what he thought of the speech. I adored the speech. I thought it was one for the archives, but we'll see what Matt thinks and get his take on the reaction to it when we come back right after the break. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt. If you're not reading Matt over at Continetti on X or at AEI, and especially listening to him on the Commentary podcast, you're missing one of the great conservative scholars and pundits of our time. I'm joined for just a couple of more minutes by Matt Continetti of Commentary and AEI. Matt, I'll give you my 20 seconds on the speech and then turn the floor over to you. I thought Trump was pretty masterful in telling the Democrats, take my hand of friendship and at least be normal for one night. But knowing that they weren't going to do it, he's saying, if you don't want to do that, I'm going to roll you. They, of course, sat on their hands and didn't take the hand of friendship. And he spent the next hour plus rolling them. It was a masterful speech. What do you think?
I thought it was a great speech, but I spent the whole speech just watching the Democrats because I was stunned. I'd never seen such behavior coming from the Congress at a joint session address. Wasn't just the lack of applause or the lack of standing for, cancer survivors or families who had lost loved ones to violent crime or terrorist attacks. That was egregious enough. But the juvenile antics, the heckling, Representative Green standing up and shaking his cane like the old man yells at cloud meme.
Yes.
Rashida Tlaib having her portable whiteboard like it was some college seminar or something. The hot pink dresses, the people who walked out and revealing their resist graphic T-shirts. I looked at it and I said that not only is the party of the Democrats the party of the faculty lounge, they are the faculty lounge. It's like looking at a crazy left-wing rally on a college campus now when the Democrats are assembled in the United States Congress. This is not a party that is ready to return to power, and Donald Trump understands that. And he was quite funny, Dwayne. The Democrats thought that they could troll Trump, but you can't out troll Donald Trump.
No,
he's the king of trolling. He's better at it than anyone on the planet Earth. And so I thought that the Democrats were the real story here, simply because they came across as completely irresponsible and unready for power. And they have 2 years to fix things, but I mean, they're starting from a very low floor. They got to climb a long way up.
They're making videos they're making Mortal Kombat avatar videos, Matt.
Exactly.
This is not a serious party right now.
Singing "We Shall Overcome" when Al Green is censured for kind of just ridiculous behavior. They don't get it. That's the problem the Democratic Party faces, Dwayne. They were repudiated in November for having their open borders policies, for having the spend thrift policies that gave us inflation, for having this cultural radical program of gender ideology, and they just won't change.
That's well said. Maxine Waters is 86 years old. She has made generational wealth being a member of Congress for 2 decades. She overcame. Okay? She did. She's doing just fine. I don't know what she's singing about. Anyway, Matt Continetti, thanks for the extra segment. Always great to talk to you. At Continetti online, and go over to Commentary and check out that podcast. It's a terrific podcast. I just love being in on a Friday. If I get to guest host and get to be on a Friday, because I get to talk to Ben Domenech of The Spectator, editor at large there, who is a good friend and a superb pundit over on Fox News. Ben, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be with you as always. I am coming to you from the parking lot of a Buc-ee's near Nashville, Tennessee, where the comic James Donald Forrest McCann and I are hauling a boat to Texas. So we are going across the country today, and it's been a pleasure. We stopped by the Knoxville Sun Sphere of infamy from The Simpsons. We did not check to see if it was actually full of wigs, but it is quite an impressive sight.
So
and,
wait, you're at the Knoxville Buc-ee's, or are you in the Nashville Buc-ee's?
We're at the Nashville one by now.
Oh, that's a small one compared to the one you passed in Knoxville.
It is actually. I would say he's quite impressed by it because he's from Australia. But I would say that by Buc-ee's standards go, this is a rather diminutive one. So
yes,
but it's still wonderful nonetheless. It is a testament to the excellence and greatness of America that Buc-ee's exists.
I have a Halloween blow-up Buc-ee's lawn ornament and a Christmas Buc-ee lawn ornament.
Oh, that is fantastic. My gosh.
Oh,
now
absolutely.
I did not know. I've seen the Christmas ones, but I did not know they had a Halloween one.
They have a Halloween one, and I even have the congratulations banner Buc-ee for when the kids graduate school. I had that.
Fantastic. You are a true great American.
Absolutely. Anyway, let's get to business. First, I'm going to stick with domestic issues with you because I'm going to get to somewhere with you, and that is the speech. You're a purveyor of words. You've been in speech writing before. Give me your analysis of what the speech was, what your take was, and how it was reacted to. And the reaction to the reaction. So go ahead and take a couple minutes there.
So I was so impressed by the speech. I thought it was masterful. I thought that while it did meander at parts, it did so in Trumpian fashion. I think that there were two things that came out of it. One is the speech itself was an impressive testament to all the things that President Trump has been able to do within his first 40 days, et cetera, and everything that I think that he was touting and pushing forward, clearly sending a message about the level to which he's going to be pushing things through in this second term, and understanding what the priorities are of Americans. I thought it was a great display of Americana when it came to the guests that he had there, in the gallery.
Yep.
And I also think that the actual main takeaway from the speech was chaos for the Democratic Party, because the truth is that this every single election cycle that they have done well in, they've done well by depicting themselves as being the candidates of normalcy versus Republican chaos, meaning that we are the calm, we are the collected party, we are not given to the chaotic nature of the Trumpian GOP. That's been their frame of things, including for Joe Biden, obviously. And yet we saw the truth laid out in front of us from the Democratic Party today, which is that they are the party of chaos. They are the party of a bunch of people who, frankly, were acting as if they were toddlers whose binky had been taken away from them.
Yep.
And they did so from the first moment. I mean, I thought it would take them a little bit of time to get there, but instead you have Al Green getting up, shaking his cane. You have the stupid signs in the seats. You have people walking out, dumb T-shirts. It's all just petulant, and it doesn't connect at all. And then, the simple fact is that for smart Democrats, they're looking at this and they're saying, why can't you guys just get up and cheer when he is applauding, all these things that are super popular among the American people, meaning, cops and the military and a strong border and, a kid with cancer. I mean, it's like, can't you just be normal? And I think that unfortunately for Democrats, they can't anymore. And the leadership that kept them normal is no longer in control. And that's a real problem for them. And until they get that ship righted, they're going to have some real problems at the ballot box, I think.
And the abnormalcy continued the rest of the week. The following day, on Wednesday, the House of Representatives voted with 10 Democrats to censure old man shaking fist at clouds. And because of the nature of a censure vote, the Speaker of the House has to call the person into the well and has to read him the riot act, which Mike Johnson did. That's his role. He has to do that. And after he did that, a whole bunch of Democrats, most of whom are multimillionaires that have built generational wealth in public service after serving in Congress for a couple of decades, started arm in arm singing "We Shall Overcome." I'm here to tell you, Ben, that Maxine Waters at 86, she's overcome. She's doing just fine. What do you make of this?
It's absolutely ridiculous. And again, it shows how out of touch they are in this moment. They've decided that cutting any kind of government, that engaging in any type of bureaucratic reform is something that they are going to defend to the hilt. And I think it's just so wrong in this moment to misjudge, the attitudes of Americans who view Washington as being a place that has become out of touch, sclerotic, and is just, not where the American people want it to be. They've demanded change in election after election. And instead of saying, well, we just have disagreements about what we cut or where we cut, but we agree that government needs to shrink and be more responsible, the Democrats have to engage in this type of ridiculous display because they don't have any other language for this moment. They haven't figured out how to message around any of the things that Donald Trump is doing effectively, and they're at odds with each other, I think, internally about the best way to go about that.
Well, one of the ways to go about that is certainly not taking 6 Democratic House women and making a video of them as Mortal Kombat avatars.
Oh my gosh, it was that whole thing is pretty ridiculous. But I have to say, this is just the depths of what they are engaging in right now. And I mean, it's of a piece with all of the different Democrat senators recording the same TikTok, videos, et cetera, with the same script. They just don't know how to message in this moment. And I think that the right really has an advantage. But at the same time, they shouldn't be complacent. Their attitude should understand that with moving fast as Donald Trump is, there comes a lot of risk, and they're going to need to defend those positions and defend them well in front of the American people.
Now I've saved the best for last, working my way through the Democratic stupid all week long. You are in the heartland of America. You are at a Buc-ee's. It doesn't get more America than that. And I mean, I say that with all love and reverence because I adore the whole Buc-ee's story, the whole franchise. So it just makes me smile that you're there. Where you are not is in the nation's capital at the mall where the Stand Up for Science rally took place this morning, with all the usual characters on the left now demanding that we follow the science on climate change. Now, one of the speakers there is one Dr. Francis Collins, formerly of the National Institute of Health, who gave us the COVID stuff and hiding the origin of the virus and the gain of function stuff and all that stuff. He was supposed. I'm nonpartisan, right? I am just a scientist. He shows up at this Democrat rally for climate change, and he brought his guitar with him. Cut 11.
Dream. Have you got that? So it's just all the good people, but the second line, part of this family, and the last line, we're joined together by this noble dream. Do that with me. This is a song for all the good people. Come on. All the good
oh my gosh.
We're part of this family. This is a song for all the good people. We're joined together by this noble dream. Well, this is a song for all of those dreamers. We're looking for answers to come our way. Scientists, doctors, students, all seekers. We share in the hopes for a much brighter day. Come on now. Well, this is a song for
Ben Domenech, I demand to know what the Democratic Party has done with James Taylor. Where have they put James Taylor?
Absolutely. I mean, Peter, Paul, and Mary, this ain't... No, that is... Oh, man, that's excruciating. I can't believe you would do that to me. I thought you were a nice person. No, that... It's ridiculous, but it also, I think, is a sign of... And I think we all knew this, that partisanship has really locked these people in to such a degree that they lose sight of the way that they seem to people who are not losing their minds currently. And that's not, something that I think you can listen to or watch and think of Francis Collins as being the kind of person you want in that role, either in the past or in the future.
Well said, Ben Domenech. At B Domenech online. Go to The Spectator, read all the stuff there. Great commentary over there. Thanks, Ben. that segment with Ben was an awful lot of fun. I had no idea when I called him ahead of time he was actually on the road at a Buc-ee's in Nashville. I know exactly where he was at on I-40. I've been actually to both of those Buc-ee locations. There was something that I was looking for at the Knoxville Buc-ee's and couldn't find it, and actually drove to Nashville to find what I was looking for at the Nashville location. So I know exactly where he was at. Anyway, he had no idea the Francis Collins thing was going down this morning at the Stand Up for Science rally. And he reacted exactly the way that I thought he would react. And it just shows the Democrats. I mean, God bless Francis Collins. I know he is a believing Christian, and I'm not going to say it's not that I'm here to pick on. Well, actually, I am here to pick on Francis Collins because what he did as National Institute of Health Director was atrocious. He did not tell the truth about gain of function. He did not tell the truth about getting vaccinated and alternative treatments. He lied about ivermectin. There's lots of things that he was not truthful about when it came to the whole COVID debacle. And he said he was nonpartisan. Well, he's not nonpartisan today with his guitar. And just think about the Democratic Party for a second. If you're 21 years old and you're in school and you're being programmed by the last few professors or teachers you've had in high school, and you're being told you've got to be a Democrat, you got to be a Democrat because that's the only way you care about the world and the climate and women and all these other things. You got to be a fighter. You got to be a fighter, right? You know, looking at the video of the Mortal Kombat Democrats. Well, here's the thing. What 21-year-old out there, what young person the Democrats need, the lifeblood of the future of the Democratic Party? What young person out there, 18 to 31-year-old voter, is going to see Francis Collins, who is 75? I don't know how old he is, but he's well into retirement. Who's going to look at Francis Collins playing a folk song on his guitar badly from the 60s, early 60s, late 50s, like it's a Kingston Trio concert? Who's going to look at that of the next generation and say, yeah, you know, I was uncertain about the Democratic Party, but Francis Collins, he speaks to my soul. That kid doesn't exist. I don't know what the Democrats are doing, but trying to be a serious party ain't it right now. Look, I'll tell you who's serious, and I mean, the Democrats have no ideas. That's the bottom line. They have no idea of what to do next strategy-wise. They have no idea what to do next policy-wise. You know who does know what to do policy-wise and actually does have a ton of great ideas? The American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. I know these people because I've actually done remotes with Hugh. I've actually had to guest host from one of these ALEC conferences when Hugh couldn't be there. And so I know all about the work that Jonathan Williams and Lisa Nelson and all the great state legislatures that send their representatives to these conferences twice a year. They exchange all sorts of great ideas, whether it's school choice or whether it's federalism and cutting waste and fraud and abuse. I mean, this didn't just originate with Elon Musk. They've been trying to cut waste, fraud, and abuse at the state level through ALEC for a long, long time. There's all sorts of good stuff that happens with ALEC, and you can take part in getting to know them as well and joining their effort, because the state legislatures are the crucible for where all the good policy ideas come from that eventually make its way to the national stage. You can go to alec.org, A-L-E-C, alec.org/Hugh to learn more. Alec.org, and I hope you check them out because they're not just a sponsor of the program. They are good friends, and they are full of really, really good ideas. In fact, one of the things Alex does is tax policy, and they look at the economics, they look at jobs reports. There's all sorts of things they do there. And we actually had a jobs report today. At the White House, there was some response to it from Donald Trump in the Oval. We'll get to in a second. His head of the Council on Economic Advisors is a guy named Kevin Hassett. He was on CNN this morning. CNN tried to say it's a meh report. 151 jobs, treading water. You were expected to hit 160. You underperformed. See, this is the problem. Well, not really. Listen to Kevin Hassett, cut 13.
The bottom line is that the Biden administration created a lot of jobs, and they tended to be government jobs. About 25% of the job creation was government jobs, and we actually, as President Trump intended, reduced government jobs by about 10,000, as you guys just mentioned. And then the other thing we're trying to do is increase manufacturing jobs. And manufacturing jobs, which you didn't mention, were up about 10,000, with about 9,000 of those being new jobs for auto workers, which, as you know, are very sticky and high-paying jobs. And so I think it's a fantastic report. It's showing exactly what President Trump intends to do. He intends to reduce government spending, to get rid of wasteful government jobs, and to create manufacturing jobs. And that's what you see. Finally, there are a bunch of signs that the flu was going to have a big impact on this job report, and that's what I think the travel and leisure thing that you guys just mentioned came from, is that people were homesick and they weren't going out and going to hotels and so on. And so I expect that that's going to reverse in the next month. And it's another reason why I was positively surprised about this. The people who account for flu in the jobs data were saying this number was going to be maybe even about 100,000 lower than what we saw.
Very quickly at the White House, here's what Donald Trump said, cut 2.
Under the final 2 years of Biden, 1 in every 4 jobs created in America was a government job. That's a tremendous percentage. But under the first full month of President Trump, which we haven't even gotten started yet, an incredible 93% of all job gains were in the private sector. So that statistic just came out.
The bottom line is the jobs that were created were American citizen jobs, not illegals for the first time in 15 months. They were manufacturing jobs, and the layoffs were of federal workers. It was a terrific jobs report. Dwayne in for Hugh. We'll be back with a little more content before we get to Jim Garrity about his trip to Syria and Ukraine. Stick around. Remind you that there are actually sites around the world where there still is hunger going on. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh. Welcome back, everybody. That's where Food for the Poor comes in. In El Salvador, which is a part of the country where they've always had to deal with poverty to some degree or another, and that was one of the pipelines for a lot of the illegal immigration that was heading up north. That's pretty much been reversed and stopped in place, and most of the people that might be trying to head to greener pastures, if you will, are deciding to stay put. And the government there is having a hard time taking care of all the people there and providing for them. This government, USAID, is so up to its neck in a bunch of fraud, waste, and abuse that there's a lot of government programs that aren't going there like they once were. And a lot of NGOs are being kind of hung out to dry. But Food for the Poor is a private enterprise. They rely on people like you and me. They are a religious-based private entity that just goes out and does the relief work, and they don't rely on the government to do things for them. If you go to the top of the Hugh Hewitt banner, or HughHewitt.com banner, there it says Feed Their Future, and that will take you to the landing page to help donate money to Food for the Poor. And we encourage you to do so as we kick this campaign off this week. It will go all month long to try to raise support for El Salvadoran kids. And there are a bunch of them that need your help. $100 feeds a kid for a year. Just think about how little $100 goes in the country now. If you try to go out and get a dinner, I mean, you can go in California where I live. You can go to a fast food restaurant. You can spend $100 at a fast food place for a family of 4. Darn near. That's how much things cost. $100 feeds a kid for a year. And think about the impact you will make in that part of the world. So there's 3 ways to give. You can either go to HughHewitt.com, click on that banner. You can text the word Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. That's Hewitt to 51555. Or you can just call them the old-fashioned way. 855 is the area code, 855-359 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-4673. Partner with us as we partner with Food for the Poor, and we help bring a little change to the life of a kid in El Salvador. Now, I tend to make fun of the media whenever and wherever I can. There's all sorts of news that's out there doesn't even make the top 5 today because of everything that's going on. But did you hear today that Donald Trump is now weighing removing 35,000 U.S. troops from Germany and redeploying them to Eastern Europe? That's kind of an interesting thing. You would think that would maybe warrant some media coverage. It's not quite getting it the way it should. Down in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, the Border Patrol began installing 18-foot tall border sections, one right after another. The panels that are going up, the 18-foot see-through slot panels that you've seen before, are replacing the 6-foot guardrails. They were just little 6-foot, like you would try to keep a bumper to keep a car from running off the edge of the road. That's the only thing that was blocking the border. It's now going to be an 18-foot stretch across the Rio Grande Valley. That's also very good news. But the media, they can't help themselves. Over at Mediaite, Diana Falzone has a exclusive, she writes. Donald Trump Jr. is considering a run for president in 2028. And she goes on for graph after graph about how her inside sources say, he's totally running. He's only going to run for president. He's not going to run for VP. You go 15 graphs into the story, and then you get to very deep into the story. It says, Trump Jr. denied he is considering a run for 2028 in a statement to Mediaite. Now, let me translate Donald Trump Jr. You've heard the Sherman-esque denial, right? That's what this is. Let me translate Don Jr. into FCC-compliant English. I accurately predicted that my buddy JD would be an instant power player in national GOP politics. So your theory is that I worked my tail off to help him get the VP nomination because I actually want to run for president in 2028. Are you blanking slow in the head? I'm actually glad you're printing this bovine excrement, though, because at least now the rest of the press corps will see how fertilizer-y your sources are and how easily you're played by them. Congrats, moron. Now, you see, that denial that you include in your story that, Don Jr.'s running, seems to be something that would cause one to look at that and say, well, that's just a clickbait story. There's no truth to it. But then again, it's media. I began the hour talking to Ben Domenech from a Buc-ee's in Nashville, Tennessee. And I go from that part of the world to Jim Garrity the Indispensable, the National Review senior political correspondent and Washington Post columnist, who spent the last couple of weeks plus, not exactly at a Buc-ee's, but in Ukraine. And if that weren't enough, he also decided to take a little side venture into Syria. Now, Jim, we have got to work through this. First of all, welcome. Thanks for being here. Tell me what we saw in Ukraine. What parts of Ukraine did you see?
Dwayne, you're a sight for sore eyes, and I would have settled for Hugh too. It's good to be home. So this is my third trip to Ukraine, and I go with a couple of buddies who started out doing aid and who now try to bring out journalists, particularly on the conservative side, to kind of get a sense of what the war is like for people who live there. This is not necessarily reporting from the front, but I got considerably closer to the front on this trip. One near on the Ukrainian side of the border near Kursk Oblast, where the Ukrainians went across the border and occupied some Russian territory.
Right.
On that one, I got to speak to basically little ladies from Russia in a hospital on the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians asked me not to disclose precisely where it is. But these were women who had been living on the Russian side in Ukrainian occupied territory. The Russians shelled them, presumably out of lousy aim. Their houses were hit. Houses, collapsed in on them. And the Ukrainian soldiers, other neighbors went and got them, pulled them out of the rubble. It took about a day or two to get them back. Remember, there's still drones flying around. They're still under fire. Brought them to the Ukrainian side, took them to this hospital, and they were treated. And Dwayne, all of these women had 4, 5, 6 pins in their legs, each one of them.
Oh.
So yeah, it was so there's some intense experiences there. So the Ukrainian trip that we've been talking about, I've been there 3 times in about 3 years. The Syria one, back when December 7th, the Assad regime falls, one of my buddies is at my house as a Christmas party, and Dwayne, this guy's reacting the way I would react if the Jets won the Super Bowl. The fall of the Assad regime was just the best news possible. And a bunch of my other friends who are, follow geopolitical events closely were like, well, that's great. He was a real SOB. He used poison gas plenty of times, absolute brutal dictator, wary about HTS and the forces that are replacing them. And just kind of starts discussing, well, wouldn't it be great if we could go over there and talk to the Syrians and see what the Syrian government is like? Now, Dwayne, if somebody makes that offer to you, how do you react?
Oh, well, as a journalist, I say I'm there. But I've got to, before I say I'm there, I've got to figure out how to convince my spousal unit of said trip.
Yeah. There's that. For lest anyone think my attitude was absolute bravado, my reaction, no, what are you, crazy? Are you kidding me? Ukraine's not dangerous enough, But they kind of talked me into it, and was told that this was a safe. It's the safest time to be in Syria in the last 13 years. Now that's a very low bar to clear, but at minimum, I have a chance to do that. We left Ukraine, got over to Turkey, flew into Damascus Airlines. In case you're thinking of visiting, it's a $200 visa for Americans, only $150 for Brits. A couple of my friends are British. And I don't know about you. I feel like we're getting screwed on that. So I kind of figure the era of British colonialism.
That's like 300 Canadian.
Yes, yeah. So we started out in Damascus, spent a couple of days there, spoke to the patriarch of the Syrian Orthodox Church, spoke to one of the last 7 Jews in Syria. So he's doing pretty well. Ironically, I think that dynamic where the smaller a minority is, the easier the majority has tolerating them because they don't find them to be a threat. When the Jewish population of Syria is down to 7, the majority in Syria is not particularly worried about him taking over. So
in Syria, what is the general tenor of the populace now that he's gone? I know they got to be thrilled that the butcher of Assad is gone. And you said they're wary about what comes next. What is that unease like? Are they optimistic about the future? Are they, are they kind of sanguine about where they're at, or what's the overall mood of the populace?
The patriarch described it as cautious optimism, but a great deal of emphasis on the caution. And I think that's pretty representative of the folks that I spoke to. There were some people who were effusively excited, who believed that, finally with the dictator gone, this is a chance for Syria. As bad as things are in Ukraine, as bad as things are in a lot of countries, Dwayne, I think you can make the case that Syria's had the worst, decade and a half of any country. I can make that case. Absolutely, I could make that case. In Ukraine, did you go to Kyiv, or did you just pretty much stay in the eastern parts? Oh, okay. So we get around, Dwayne. We did Kyiv. Okay. And in case you're wondering about ironically, I was there, and a lot of the important news regarding Ukraine was happening back in Washington. This is back when Trump and Zelensky had their awful Oval Office clash. Trump was making news on this almost every day. The Ukrainians were not. They weren't greeting this. They weren't happy about this. But if you're wondering if they're out of we got to give up now. No, it was not. I think in a way they were almost prepared for Trump to push U.S. policy in a direction that was hostile to them and much more friendly to Russia. They didn't like it. but there's almost this Eastern European fatalism, this sense of like, well, you know what? Everything else that could go wrong in this war has gone wrong for us. We were supposed to have Russian tanks rolling through Kyiv in 3 days. Here
Right.
we are, 3 years later, we're still fighting. They're not. It's like, it could change, but my sense was nobody's in a mood to surrender. Nobody's in a mood to talk to Putin. Nobody trusts Putin, and I don't think you're going to see the Ukrainians really eager to sit down and hammer out some deal with a Russian dictator who they do not trust in the slightest.
Just a couple of seconds left, and I appreciate everything you're saying there. Is there a difference between Eastern Ukraine and Western Ukraine as to whether they still believe they can eventually push Russia out with enough resources, or is that fatalism gone? Just real quick.
It's like there might have been differences. I think somebody put it, Eastern Ukraine might have been a little more Russia friendly, but once you got mass graves, everybody stopped giving you the benefit of the doubt.
That's well said. Jim Garrity, at Jim Garrity, Garrity the Indispensable. Follow him at National Review. At this time, we are always joined by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Dwayne. You know, I see a problem. I try to come up with a solution.
That's very Trumpian of you.
We're all transactional here. The networks are in trouble with their ratings in the tank. But I know of a program that's like money in the bank. It's got intrigue, it's got drama, it's got passion and suspense. It's full of big surprises, and the atmosphere's intense. It may be a little talky with 2 nouns for every verb, but the hero is compelling and the dialogue's superb. There's a lot of human interest, which could use a big revival. There's tragedy and humor, illness and survival. The pilot got a number, but I think there's room for growth with its geniuses and villains who are sometimes sort of both. It's a plan that's almost foolproof, far beyond the network's botching. If they run it every Tuesday, I guarantee folks will be watching. It's easy to produce, and the spots will all be saleable. And since he never sleeps, I think the president's available. Whatever network gets him will enjoy a ratings bump. Must-see TV's yesterday. Today, it's must-see Trump. It's a drama, it's a sitcom, it's a game show by Tarzana Joe.
That's outstanding as always. TarzanaJoe.com is where you will find that verse posted, if not now, very soon, I assume.
Very soon, very soon.
And how's business in the verse department? You know, it's spring. Weddings are right around the corner. There's all sorts. You know, life begins anew here. So, how are verse commissions?
A young man's fancy may turn to love in the spring, but so far it's been a little light. It's been a light year so far, but that's okay. I'm honing my skills at gardening, golf, and I haven't managed to kill any plants or make any birdies, but it's okay. It's okay.
Well, America, let me tell you, this is not somebody that you want to go off into retirement as a gardener. The man has a gift for words. Put him to use. Go to TarzanaJoe.com. You can email him at TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com or go to TarzanaJoe.com, and there is a button there that says, I need a poem, and that's what you would click. Joe, as always, thank you very much, and let's see if we can get business to pick up for you.
Thank you, Dwayne. I appreciate it.
We'll see you next week. Look, like I said, Hugh's going to be up in just a minute. I want to kind of remind you about what happened at Columbia University today. $400 million worth of funding they get from the federal government just got yanked because of them playing footsies with all the anti-Semites on campus. Exactly one Democrat has reacted to that yanking of funding. That's John Fetterman. Columbia let anti-Semitism run amok to cater to the lunatic fringe and paid provocateurs. Leadership allowed those a-holes to take over the campus and terrorize Jewish students. Now Columbia pays for its failure, and I support that. Well said, John Fetterman. Where's the rest of the Democrats?